Go. All right, so the first question is, the following equation has two different solutions. Solve the equation and place one solution in the answer box. The larger goes first, the smaller goes second. Okay, so how do we solve that equation there? What do we do? So I'll bring it over here. X squared plus 14x plus 40 equals 0. All right, so what do you remember about how you solve x squared equations? In fact, let me just move it to a fresh screen here where you got more room. Okay, so number one, this is section 2.5, number one. X squared plus, what was it, 14x? Plus 40. And did it say equal 0? Yeah, equals 0. Okay. Equals 0. So yeah, so solving x squared, I think we have talked briefly about it in our review. Solving x squared, remember, first step is to get a 0. The second step is to try to factor, which means like the two parentheses, you know. So first step really has already been done for us, huh? We already have a 0 there. So we'll go right on to the second step. And the second step is try to factor, which you know what that means, right? That means the two parentheses. You put x and x, right? And then what do you do with the 40?
Break it apart.
Yeah. Yeah. What multiplies to be 40, huh?
10 and 4.
Yeah. So for 40 can be 10 and 4, 5 and 8. Yeah, we're going to go with 10 and 4. How do you know it's 10 and 4 and not 5 times 8 or 2 times 20? Because they add to be 14. Beautiful. Yeah. So plus 10 plus 4. Either order, you can put the 4 first and the 10. It doesn't matter. And now, remember what you do? You set each one equal to 0. So like the x plus 10 by itself gets the 0. Or the x plus 4 by itself gets the 0. Remember that? Because if two things are timesing to be 0, either one could be 0. Right? If I said to you, hey guys, I'm thinking of two numbers, they times to be 0. You know either one could be 0, huh? To make two things times to be 0. All right, and then we finish solving. Subtract 10 from both sides there. And same thing over here. Subtract 4 from both sides there. So this will be negative 10, and this will be negative 4. So there's our two answers. Now they want you to put, what was it, larger first, then smaller? Yeah, so larger first, then smaller. All right, so which one do we put first? Good job. It's the negative 4 that's actually larger because it's less negative, huh? And then the negative 10. Yeah, those are the two answers to that equation. That good? All right, let's go on. So I've got them already before me, so I'm just going to write number 2 for you. So x squared minus 5x plus 6 equals 0. All right, can you try the same thing there? Okay, so the two parentheses, x is in the front. So what multiplies to be 6 and can somehow make the negative 5 in the middle? Yeah, 2 and 3, both negative, huh? Yeah, because two negatives multiply to be positive, don't they? And they add to be negative 5. That's right, because you lose $2, lose $2, you lost 5. Either order, you can put that minus 3 first. But then we don't stop there, huh? Then we set each one equal to 0, because if two things are timesing to equal 0, either one could be 0 to make that happen, huh? So then we finish it up from there, and we add 2 to both sides. And then over here we're going to add 3 to both sides. And so what do we get? X is 2. This cancel. And x is 3. Now, they don't want smaller, larger. On this one, they just want you to enter both answers with a comma, either order. As I'm pretty sure how it'll go, how the entry goes on that one. Questions on that one? That seem good? Anything I can answer? Let's try right over here, number 3. Number 3 is p squared minus 2p equals 0. So same kind of thing. Start with factoring. Yeah, so take out a p, put the 1 parenthesis, right? How'd you do this? What goes in the parentheses there? P minus 2, because that p can multiply and go back, huh? And now what do we do from here? Exactly what we did here. What did we do? We took the two things that were multiplied and we said the first one could be 0 or the second one could be 0. So the first one, the p alone, can be 0, or the second one, the p minus 2 can be 0. See how that's exactly the same thing we did before? When you have two things timesing to equal 0, either one could be 0 to make them times and be 0. So this one's done. This other one we have to finish, right? So we add 2 to both sides to get p alone, and p is 2. So the answers are 0 and 2. They just want you to enter them with a comma. Either order, it doesn't matter. You can put the 2 first, then the 0. Either way. Good. Questions on that one? So I'll do the first step. So you just leave the 2m there, and then that other part, you do the 2 parentheses on. Remember that? That multiply to be 63.
7 and 9.
Yeah, 7 and 9. Yep, so it's m with a 7, m with a 9. Now, how do you know the signs? Do you remember that little rule for the signs? Yeah, exactly. The one in the middle always goes to the bigger number, huh? So the bigger number is the 9. So that'd be minus. Now the other one, the smaller number, the 7, can be plus or minus, sort of depends on what's going on. We're trying to make minus 2 in the middle, so what does the 7 need to be? Positive, because if you gain $7 and lose 9, that's a minus 2 overall, isn't it? Yeah, and then they also multiply to be negative, don't they? One positive, one negative. Yeah, so that's good. Again, the order doesn't matter. You can have the minus 9 first and the plus 7, doesn't matter. Now, so it's all factored. Now, once we've got it all times, that's what factoring is, right? They're all multiplied now. What do we do next? So there are 3 things multiplying to equal 0, so that means the first one could be 0, or the second one could be 0, or the third one could be 0, huh? Any, right? Because a bunch of things are times into be 0. Any of them could be 0, and then they'll all multiply to be 0. Won't they? So then you just solve each of those. How do we solve the first one?
Divide by 2.
Yeah, just divide by 2, because that 2 is multiplied. And what is 0 over 2?
0.
Just 0, huh? Yeah. And then here, subtract the 7. So we get minus 7. Here, add the 9. And we get 9. So there's our 3 answers: 0, minus 7, and positive 9. That's good. Questions I can answer? Okay, so we're going to go for 2 parentheses, huh? Remember how this one works? So we got m in the front. What 2 numbers multiply to be the 9? 3 and 3. And how do they make negative 9? One positive, one negative. Either way, you put the negative first and the positive. Either way. And do you see why there's nothing in the middle? There's no middle term because plus 3 and minus 3 make 0, don't they? That's why there's no middle, right? And now you guys understand what I mean by that? It's like there's m squared 0m minus 9, in a sense. It's like there's a 0m in the middle. Why is there a 0m in the middle? Well, because they add to be 0. They multiply to be minus 9, don't they? These numbers multiply to be minus 9, but they add to be 0. That's why there's no term in the middle. Anyway, you don't have to do all that. Probably overkill. Now just set each one equal to 0 separately, like usual, and then just get the m alone. Subtract 3 from both sides. Add 3 to both sides. And there's our answer. Minus 3 and plus 3, either order. We got it. Questions on that? Not too bad? Okay. If you're good, I'm going to move right on with number 6. Why don't I just do it right here? So number 6. 4x squared minus 40x plus 64, equals 0. A little nicer there. Equals 0. Okay. So try that one. On that one. What do we take out? What do they all have in common?
4.
A 4, yeah. So, and then we do, notice again, we do the one parenthesis, if they have something in common, we do the one parenthesis first, then the 2. And so then that's x squared minus 10. See how it changes the numbers? That's why you can't go straight to the 2, huh? You got to do the 1, the numbers change, and then you do the 2. Okay, and so what's that going to be? What multiplies to be 16 adds to be 10?
-2,
8 and 2. Yeah, they got to both be negative because they'll have to be negative 10 that way, won't they? If you lose $8, you lose $2, you lost $10, and the two negatives multiply to be positive. Perfect. Now, a good question was asked. Faith was asking. It's a good question. Well, okay, what do we do with that 4 out there? Well, you guys know the next step, right? When a bunch of things are times, each one equals 0. But her question's good. What about the 4? Well, let's just. There's that part, and that part. Let's just set each part equal to 0. 4 equals 0, or x minus 8 equals 0, or x minus 2 equals 0. Now, 4 equals 0. That's crazy. So then we just throw it away. So really it ends up doing nothing. And you don't have to actually write 4 equals 0. But I just want you to see logically, does that make sense? That 4 is not going to play any role. In other words, I bet I can make it easier if I say this to you. So guys, let's play a game here. I'm thinking of two numbers in my head. Okay, I really am. I'm going to call it x and y. I'm thinking of two numbers in my head. I'm going to times them together, and the answer comes out to be 0. What do you know about my numbers if they're timesing and coming out 0? One of them is 0. In fact, I was thinking about a 3 and a 0. And that they were timesing. 3 times 0, of course, is 0. Yeah, you're right. One of them has to be 0. Now, it was the second number. But could it have been the first number? Could I have been thinking of the first one being 0? Yeah, that either one, right? First one or second one. Now, again, that's all what you already know. Now, let me add to it, putting a 4 in the front. What if I said, okay, guys, same game. I'm thinking of two numbers. They times to be 0 times 4. So 4 times my first number times my second number comes out to be 0. What does that mean? The same thing it meant before. See how the 4 adds nothing to the meaning? That's exactly why the 4 is ignored here. Does that make sense? If you said 4 times the number times numbers, that just means the same thing. One of those unknown numbers must be 0. It means nothing about the 4, huh? See what I mean by that logically? So numbers in the front that don't have a letter, now careful, that don't have a letter. It's because he's just a 4. He doesn't have an x. He can't vary. He doesn't have a variable. He's only 4. Well, then he's not 0. And we just ignore it. We're just trying to find out what's making the 0 happen. It's one of these guys being 0, huh? The 4 can't make 0. Whereas, remember in the last, it's right there on the screen. No, it's not. It's the last one, number 4. Let's go back to number 4. Number 4, we took out a 2. It wasn't just a 2, it was a 2m. So you see it had a letter, so then that could be 0, couldn't it? See the difference? So if it's just a number in front, ignore it. That can't be 0. But if it has a letter with it, yeah, well then he's going to play a role. He could perhaps be 0. Makes sense on that? So we ignore that part. We just finish up the other two parts. Add the 8. So x is 8. Add the 2. X is 2. So our answers are 8 and 2. Either order doesn't matter. Questions on that one? All right, let's move on. Number 7. Let's see. X squared minus 10x plus 25 is 36. By first factor, and then taking a square root. Yeah, okay. So they're notice. I'm not reading the instructions. The instructions say the following. I'll write them out. First, factor the left side, then take a root of both sides. So that's what the instructions say. So let's first take that left side and do the two parentheses, Can you factor that left side? X is in the front. So what are the numbers that multiply to be 25, add to be minus 10? Yeah, 5 and 5. Yeah, and both are negative, huh? Because if you lose $5 and lose $5, you lost 10. And two negatives multiply to be positive. Perfect. Okay, so we first factored the left side. And by the way, what do we always do when we have two identical twins like that? Yeah, it's second power, because that's what second power means, two of them, huh? So we'll write it that way. Whenever we have identical twins, we just say, well, there's 2 power, 2 of them. And then it says, now finish it up by doing the root. Remember how the root is the opposite of the second power and it just cancels it out? Remember that kind of thing? They're like a poison and an answer. They just neutralize each other. So we'll go root on this side and root. Now, here's the trick, though. Have I done my dumb saying when you put a roof on the house, you got to open down the ladder? Oh, I did. Okay, so you're used to it. All right, then I won't. Yeah, when you put a roof, you got to put the root and plus or minus root. So when you put a roof on the house, you got to go up and down the ladder, plus and minus, to help you remember. So you got to put plus or minus on that side. When you put a root over both sides, you got to do plus or minus. And so that root cancels the square, and we get x minus 5. And the other side, what's the square root of 36? Going to be 6. Okay, now how do we, what do we do with that? Well, that plus or minus actually is a shorthand for 2 separate equations. So I'll just go ahead and write the 2 equations, since we have more to do. The first one is x minus 5 is negative 6, or the second one is x minus 5 is positive 6. So it just means those 2 equations, negative 6 and positive 6. And then we finish those up. So how do we finish solving for x? Just add 5 both sides here. Add 5 both sides there. So we get x is what? Minus 1. X is 11. There's our answers. Minus 1 and 11. So notice we solved that problem in kind of a different way, didn't we? We factored the left side. And then it was squared, so then we just rooted it, which cancels the square. And then a plus or minus means 2 equations, 2 options there. Questions I can answer? That good? All right. So let's keep moving. So number 8, 3h squared minus 36 equals 0. Try that one. Does it? Had some weird parts. Okay, so take out, what's the first step? What do we take out? 3, yeah, they both have 3 in common, right? We get to that, so far so good. Now, this doesn't really factor, does it? Right? It kind of gets us stuck there. We think, well, what can we do with that? Well, we could just go on and do what we normally do. It doesn't factor further. So what do we normally do? When we have 2 things timesing to equal 0, we say the first one is 0, but that's ridiculous. Or the second one is 0. Good so far? Isn't that the usual thing we do? Right? When we have 2 things timesing to be 0, we say first one is 0 or second one. And the first one's just a number. 3 can't be 0. So we just throw that away. Remember, we ignore numbers alone. They can't be 0. If it had an h, then it would have a variable that could be 0. All right, it comes down to this. Solve that equation. How can we solve that equation, though? That doesn't factor. We're used to factoring. Yeah, right. So let me give you the game plan. So basically, here's the overall game plan. If you have x squared and no x to the first, that's what we have here. See how we have an h squared and we don't have like a regular h anywhere? We just have like h squared and number. So if you have that, this is a little different, a little easier actually. Get x squared alone and then do the root and the plus or minus root. So, okay, so let's first off get it. Let's add the 12 over. And so we get h squared is 12. And now what am I going to do? So step 1, get it alone. Step 2, root. When you put a roof on the house, up and down the ladder, right? Plus or minus on the number side. Is this making sense? So this is what you do when you have like an x squared and no regular x, or an h squared and no regular h. Just x squared and numbers, or h squared and numbers. Just get that thing alone and root it. That'll turn it into a normal h. Remember, rooting cancels squaring. Remember how they're opposites of each other? So this just means h is plus or minus the square root of 12. And then remember, we learned to simplify the square root of 12. How do we simplify that? Yeah, break it down, use your calculator. 4 times 3, 2 times 2. Remember what we do there? 2 2's inside, sends 1 2 to the front, and they're gone. So it's plus or minus 2 root 3. The 3's left over inside. He's all that's left there. Is that good? I could do that more slowly. Here, it might have been a little abrupt. So, again, if you break that down, 4 times 3, 2 times 3. So it's plus or minus 2 times 2 times 3, right? Because 2 times... we don't take the 4s. Everybody see why we don't take... Because the 4 broke down further. The 4's not there anymore. He broke apart into 2 2's. So all we have in the end is 2 2's and a 3. That is a 12. Right? 2 times 2 is 4 times 3 is 12. That is a 12. And then the 2 in, 1 out. That's what square roots do. So we take those 2 2's inside and ship 1 right to the front. Plus or minus 2 root 3. Okay. So what do we do when we have x squared and no x to the first? Just x squared in numbers. Just get that squared alone and root it. They're actually quicker. You don't have to mess around with factoring. Just get it alone and root it. But don't forget to go up and down the ladder. All right, let's try. Number 9 is going to be pretty much the same thing. X minus 4 squared equals 26. So rather than, you could write 2 of those x minus 4s, and that'd be such a pain, though. Instead, just get that thing out of there. Just root it right now. Roof on the house, both sides. Don't forget to go plus or minus. This will be a quicker way to go. So I'm going to go roof on the house, roof, and then plus or minus. We put a roof on the house up and down the ladder. Just like that, and rooting cancels squaring. So, yeah. So over here, the root of 26, if you use your calculator, it's 2 times 13. So that can't do anything because there's not 2 of anything, right? Remember, it's a 2 for 1 deal. There's not 2 of anything. So it just stays root 26. So we have x minus 4 is plus or minus root 26. Just has to stay that way. Last step to get x alone. See how we got rid of the 2 power? That's why rooting's so nice. Then add the 4 to both sides. And so x equals... Now... could I write plus or minus 4 root 26? No, that's not correct. Why not? Because if you write that 4, you write any 2 things right next to each other with no symbol in the middle, it means times, doesn't it? That 4 is not timesing the root 26. That's wrong. That 4 is what? Adding. We added 4 to both sides, didn't we? See how that would be changing the meaning? Well, then what do? You leave the plus or minus on there, and you just put the plus 4 right there. That's correct now. So there's actually 2 answers on this one. And they want you to type them in like this. 4 plus root 26, comma, 4 minus root 26. Either order, but you do have to separate them into 2 answers like that. Make sense? In both cases, the 4 is positive, but the root 26 can be added or subtracted. Again, what's the game plan when you have x squared and no x to the first? And that's what we have here, by the way. This is a big x squared, really, isn't it? It's a fancy one, but it's a big thing squared. And then this doesn't have an x to the first power. So what do? Number 1, get the squared piece alone. And then step 2, the root and the plus or minus root, huh? So this big old squared piece, you just need to get that alone, which means you need to add the 17 to both sides. Just move that 17 over, and then put the root and the plus or minus root. So we need to add the 17 to both sides, like that, and we get 4x plus 9. Squared is 17. Good so far? So whenever you have a squared piece, just isolate it, get it alone. And now what do? I'm going to root it, huh? Going to do the root over both sides. Put a roof on the house, up and down the ladder. Don't forget the plus or minus. And then the root cancels the square. Remember, they're opposites, antidotes. They undo each other. So then that gets rid of. There's no more root on the left side. It's totally gone. The root does stay on the right side, though. Is that good? Now, you can't do anything with 17, can you? There's no breaking that down. It's just going to stay root 17. So now I would, do we have more work to do? We do. We have more steps, huh? So I would, whenever you have more work to do, it's going to be easiest, I think, to go ahead and you have a plus or minus, is to just break it into the two different equations. It means two different equations, right? Well, you don't have to. It doesn't matter. Having said all that, doesn't matter. Just subtract 9 from both sides. So then we get 4x is minus 9 plus or minus root 17. That good? The minus 9 just stays in the front. Last step to get x alone? Divide by that 4. And then just divide by that 4. Boom. Now, are they going to let us do the answer? Oh, they want you to separate it again. So they want you to say that your answers are minus 9 plus root 17 over 4, comma, minus 9 minus root 17 over 4. That's what they want. So when you type this in to the system, you've got to type in parenthesis minus 9 plus the root of 17, parenthesis, divided by 4, comma, parenthesis minus 9 minus root 17, divided by 4. You got to, so basically, long story short, if you have more than one item in a numerator or denominator, you have to parenthesize them, telling the computer these guys are hanging together. Make sense on that? So, there we go. On that. When you type it in. Any questions? All is well? All right, let's move on with number 11. Oh, no, 11. I'm going to skip 11. It's an easy one for you. Let's go to 12. 2x squared plus 7x minus 15 equals 0. Okay. I'm going to change, I'm going to add to the plan now. They're going to make the problems more difficult now. So solving x squared and x to the first. When you have x squared and x to the first, here's what I'm going to suggest. Number 1. Get it equal to 0. But again, it already is. Step 2. You can try to factor if you want. You know, like the double parenthesis thing. Go ahead and give that a try if you want. This one's going to be a harder one to factor. It does factor. They don't all factor. In a minute, they're going to give you ones that don't factor at all. That are actually impossible to factor. This one is possible. It's just difficult. So I'm going to go ahead and go on to the new game plan right now. The new game plan. Did we talk about, I can't remember, honestly. If things don't factor, did I mention the quadratic formula?
Yeah.
Yeah, so then do that. Negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. That's what you do if it's hard to factor. So I'm just going to dive right in that. So you guys know that. You guys are used to that. Is that right? Let's do it. So a is 2, a is the 2, b is the 7, c is the minus 6. Good. So that review was beneficial for us. We've been over many of these things. So here we go. So negative b, negative 7, plus or minus the square root of b squared, 7 squared minus 4, times a, times c, negative 15, all over 2 times a. There we go. And then we work that out step by step. So negative 7 plus or minus square root of 7 squared. Just use your calculator if you're a little rusty on some of those times tables. 49, 7 squared, 7 times 7, 49. Now, in this next part, the important thing is to get the sign right. And to do that, you just count the negatives. So we have that negative 4, that's one negative, positive, a second. So we have 2 negatives, basically, right? Negative, positive, negative. 2 negatives, going to make it plus, isn't it? Plus, and then just use your calculator. 4 times 2 times 15. It'll be 120. Over 4. 2 times 2 is 4. Does everybody see what happened there? See how I figured out the sign? I just counted how many negatives we're multiplying. 2 negatives make positive, don't they? If there was just 1 negative, it would have stayed subtraction. So 1 negative will stay subtraction. 2 negatives will become positive. So we had a -4, a +2, and a -15. 2 negatives became positive 120. All right, so then what do we get? -7 plus or minus square root of 169 all over 4. Then hit the buttons on your calculator. Square root of 169 comes out a nice clean 13. So now we're ready to separate it. It's -7 plus 13 over 4. Or comma, -7 minus 13 over 4. Just use your calculator. That is what? 6 over 4 or minus 20 over 4. And then you just reduce those, huh? This reduces to be 3/2. This is just -5. So our two answers are 3/2, comma, -5. And we could have done that by factoring. But I think quadratic formula is sometimes easier than difficult factoring anyway. Okay, so I'm just going to do the quad A, B, C. So we've already got a 0. Remember, step 1 is to get a 0. We got it. So we go -b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So that's -23 plus or minus the square root of b squared, 23 squared minus 4 times a, which is 3 times c, which is 30, all over 2 times a. All right, so then -23 plus or minus, those are big numbers. Definitely use a calculator there.
It's 529.
Thank you. It is indeed 529 minus
360.
360. Thank you. All over 6. And then that's -23 plus or minus 160. Hey, there's 169 again, huh? So bring that up here. So it's -23 plus minus, and square root of 169, 13 again. So then there we go. So now we have the two options: -23 plus 13 over 6, or -23 minus 13 over 6. You have those two different options, and then you use your calculator: -10 over 6, or -36 over 6. So then just reduce this divide by 2, by -5/3, comma, -6, right? This one just becomes -6. There's the two answers on that one. So to 15 we go. So I'm going to jump to 15. 15 is x squared minus 4x plus 24 is 5. Okay, so remember solving x squared, when you have x squared and x to the first. What's step 1? Remember, it's to get a 0. So don't jump into the quad right now. You first have to get rid of that 5. You can't have a number on the right side other than 0. You got to have 0. So that's why I simply wanted to remind you on this problem. So yeah, so what's our first step? We got to get rid of that 5. So just subtract 5. So this is the first time they haven't given us 0 on the right side. So we have to do that. So x squared minus 4x plus, was that 19? Yeah, and now you know step 2, go to the quad. -b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. It gets a little messy at the end. Let me jump in with you. So our A is 1 here, right? A, B, and C are just numbers, aren't they? They're not the x squared or anything. So A is 1, B is the -4, the C is the 19. See how if we had skipped the first step of subtracting 5, we would have had the wrong C, we would have had 24. So we got the right C now. So you got to get 0 first. So you can't use the quadratic formula until you have 0 on the right side. First have 0. Okay, so -b, -4. It's going to be +4, isn't it? Does everybody see that? Because it's, negative from the formula, and then b is itself -4. B squared minus 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which is 19, all over 2a. Okay. What's that give us? 2 negatives, so +4 plus or minus the square root of 16 minus 4 times 9, 40, 76? 76 in there, all over 2. And I'll bring that up here. So then that's 4 plus minus, and that's -60, right? Okay, now remember what we do with a negative in a root. They always just kick out an I, so that negative just pops out an I right to the front. So we get 4 plus or minus I root 60 over 2. Now we have to break down that root 60. So the square root of 60, 60 is 6 times 10, 2 times 3, 2 times 5. So that means it's the root of 2 times 2 times 3 times 5, isn't it? Right? These are the little numbers that wouldn't break down any further. So square root's a 2 for 1 deal. So 2 2's in, 1 2 out, they're gone. So it's 2 root 15, the 3 and 5 remultiply to be 15, huh? So root 60 becomes 2 root 15 on that Genesis.
There won't be a -15?
And now, where are we at? So this leaves us with 4 plus or minus. Now this 2 comes out. 2I root 15 all over 2. Are you tracking with me so far? So this 2 root 15, the root 60 became 2 root 16. 2 root 15, I mean. Okay? Now, can we do any more? Everybody good to hear questions to this point? Now, can I cancel these 2's? Not just the 2's. As long as I do both, it's okay. Remember, pluses and minuses are Costco glue, which means they're a package deal, which means you do both or you do nothing, right? Like at Costco, you buy the whole package or nothing. So yes, you can do that if you also do that one. So 2 goes into 4 2 times, and then 2 cancels 2. So it'll be 2 plus or minus I root 15. So they want you to write that as 2 answers. So it'll be 2 plus I root 15, comma, 2 minus I root 15. There's our 2 answers. See how that 2 from the bottom went into both of them? Because they were plus and minus. That's glue, isn't it? What if it could only go into one of them? Like, what if this other guy here had been a 3? And 2 can't go into 3, so would it still go into the 2? No, then it wouldn't do anything at all. We would stop right there. At Costco, if you can't buy the whole package, they don't let you cut it and buy it as part, right? That's what the pluses and minuses are in algebra. They glue them together. So it has to be both or nothing. We did both, so there's our answer. One more, the last one, number 19. These are all the same. So 3m squared minus m plus 9 equals 5. Yeah, so try that one. This will be our last one for this section. Okay, so first step is to get a 0. Step 1, get a 0. Subtract 5. 3m squared minus m plus 4 is 0. And then we do the quad. So a is 3. What's b? -1, huh? So make sure you keep the negative with it. So b is -1, a is 3, b is -1, c is 4. So here we go. Negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay, let's plug the stuff in. So negative, -1. Did you guys get that carefully? So it's going to become positive there. Because the b is -1, and you get the minus sign from the formula. Square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2a, and a is 3. Okay. So what does that give us? Two negatives here. Make positive 1 plus or minus square root of 1, right? -1 squared is 1. Minus, what is that? 48, huh? Thank you. 6. And so bring that up here. So that's 1 plus or minus square root of minus 47. And then negative in a root. What do we do with a negative in a root? Just pops out as an I, and the negative isn't there anymore. So it's 1 plus or minus I root 47 over 6. Now the root 47 just won't break down, huh? Nothing goes into 47, so it just stays that way, and that's just it. There's nothing more we can do. They want you to write it separate, so 1 plus I root 47 all over 6, comma 1 minus I root 47 all over 6. And that's the answer.